Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Philippe. I'm here with the Charter for Compassion. Today we have the opportunity to be in our Global Read webinar series with today's Global Read is with the book One, A Story of Hope in Our Time. This is by Devon Clunis. And we are super grateful to not only have the author here with us, Devon Clunis, but also the facilitator for this conversation, Reverend Dr. James Christie. Thank you both for joining us, for taking the time to have this conversation, to inspire other people, and to bring that hope that this book invokes as much as it does. The floor is yours, and then at the end I'll come later to give some announcements.
Well, thank you, Felipe, and thank you to all of you who may be viewing this webinar, and a word of appreciation in advance for those of you who may come to view it in its archived and recorded form. Of course, a special word of thanks to Devon Clunis, who is at the moment enjoying some great waterfront scenery in Mexico. I'm coming to you from the city of Winnipeg, which is in the heart of the Great Plains of North America. It also geographically is in the heart of the country of Canada and in the heart of the North American continent, or as it's referred to by our Indigenous peoples, certainly, as Turtle Island. Now, it's been our custom for the last decade and more to offer land acknowledgements when we begin any event or session, whether in person or virtually. So I would like to take this moment to acknowledge that we are actually recording this event and broadcasting to you in part from Winnipeg, which is the ancestral home of the Cree people, the Oji Cree, the Dene, the Lakota, and Dakota. And also, we acknowledge this particular province of Manitoba and city of Winnipeg as the homeland of the Métis peoples, which is in fact, as Devon and I were chatting before we became live on the link, is the way that I want to introduce Devon as well. The purpose today is really to get to know Devon, to get to know his book, and at the same time, to get to know something about his commitment and I suppose tangentially mine, to the concept of the Compassion Charter and its extension into cities of compassion. I love introducing Devon. This is not our first rodeo together. And it's one of the great joys of life, as the Canadian broadcaster of great repute, Peter Zosky, used to say, to introduce one friend to another friend, or in this case, one friend to a great many of friends around Canada, across the United States, and even beyond. So I will say in beginning that Devon is Canada's first Black chief of police. Devon was Canada's first Inspector General of Policing, and Devon is currently working as an international policing and leadership consultant. You'll notice the word police recurring there. Devon and I, in fact, came to know each other when he assumed his responsibilities as chief of police back in the early years of the last decade. And the thing that always strikes me about Devon is his essential Greekness. Now, when I say essential Greekness, I mean that the origins of the term policeman is actually lies in the Greek term polis, city, sometimes translated as community. Devon is the ultimate, perhaps even the archetype, polis man, a man of the city, although his life encompasses far more than the city of Winnipeg, in which he has and does live, to which he has contributed greatly, and in which he anticipates and I believe will contribute and engage even more. So, Devon, as a colleague, as a friend, gee, it's awful good to see you. I don't even envy you being down there in warm weather with the sea on the horizon.
Well, thank you, my dear friend, and thank you for the very generous introduction. Very humbled by it, but very happy and delighted to be participating in this with you. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And as you said, I think we can consider ourselves global citizens. Little boy from Jamaica, grew up in Winnipeg, does work in Canada and the US, and I'm coming to you from Mexico where I'm visiting my grandchild. So we truly are global citizens.
Something significant about all of the images and metaphors that are in that particular word of greeting to our friends online. Maybe we should pick up actually, Devon, with with your journey and with the book. In fact, they're inseparable. And
Mhm.
there you, as you rightly say, are also a little boy from Jamaica, as well as a cosmopolitan citizen, not only of Winnipeg in Canada, but quite frankly, of the entire globe. So, can you tell us a little bit about, well, about how you came to be in Winnipeg, its impact upon you, and how the book, One, A Story of Hope for a Time, actually emerged from all of that?
Yes, absolutely. And I always like to give credit to my mother for us ending up in Winnipeg. People would think I'm blaming her. No, I'm not. I grew up in a little village in Jamaica called Harmony Vale, and I was raised by my grandparents. A lot of people experience this where grandparents are the primary caregivers. My mother, for a period of time, was in Kingston, then immigrated on her own to Winnipeg to seek out a better life for the family. And so for the first 11, almost 12 years of my life, I lived with my grandparents. They were my entire world in a community where I understood the culture. Everyone looked like me. Today, we would say that we were poor. We had no electricity, no running water. We walked everywhere, over an hour one way to school. But I never felt any sense of deficiency. My youngest sister and myself arrived in Winnipeg in 1975. I was almost 12, so now I live with our mother. And most people would say that would be a good thing for a child. But remember, again, for me, it was like coming to live with a stranger. And so that
Mhm.
very first year was incredibly challenging. But I give my mother credit for making a sacrifice, leaving us behind to go and eke out a better life for us. And although it was challenging that first year, whenever I look back, I'm still always very thankful that we made that move. Incredibly
Mm.
so.
Well, certainly your coming to Canada has been significant for you and significant, of course, for the city of Winnipeg and far beyond that. So, little boy in Jamaica comes to Canada and has a challenging, well, let's be candid, pretty rough start. And yet, here you are providing hope, both in your person and in your prose, to people who, in some cases, know you well and treasure you dearly, but to others who've never really heard of you, as astonishing as that is to me. But many of the best secrets in the world are contained in Canada, and we're always glad to share. So let's share some of yours, Devon.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, the first year was challenging. And I want to take us back to 1975, North America, never mind Winnipeg, Canada, was not very diverse. When I arrived in the city, there would be days, sometimes weeks, aside from seeing somebody in my family, that I would see somebody else who looks like me. And I remember walking to that first classroom, grade 6, and walking in and just feeling this odd sense, something I'd never experienced before. I was standing out in the crowd. I looked around, there was no one like me. And truly, that first year was incredibly challenging, and I didn't realize I was struggling until it was the end of the school year. We're sitting with two teachers. And again, they didn't share what I like to call my shade of beautiful. And one teacher said these words. She said, "He's just not a very smart little boy." They had advised my mother and myself that I had failed grade 6. And the one teacher said, "He's just not a very smart little boy. Let's put him in a class for slow learners." Now, in today's culture, and I always like to point this out, many will be quick to judge that teacher and call her a racist. And I would say, no, let's not go there that quickly, because as much as it was a challenge for me, it likely was a difficult challenge for that teacher as well, having never dealt with a child like myself, never mind just a culture, but coming from Jamaica, struggling. And so I never blame her and call her a racist. That was just her experience. They give me two options: move ahead into a class in grade 7 for what they call slow learners, or repeat grade 6. And I remember thinking very clearly, if I repeat grade 6, I'm going to feel inadequate, dumb, because I'll be older than the other kids. But it was profoundly clear. And again, I never preach at anyone when I tell this part of the story, but I said that was my first real God moment, because something inside my head at age 12 said, the right decision is to repeat grade 6, because that will set your life on a better course. But the saving grace was the second teacher, whose name is Miss Hannah, who I consistently speak about, who said, "Devon, if you come to school an hour early every day next year, I'll be here and I will help you." She also didn't share my shade of beautiful, but why would she be willing to dedicate so much time to this young child? And that's what I did. Next September, I got up, went to school early. Miss Hannah was there faithfully every day to meet with that little boy. And I remember the day she said to me, "Devon, this is so easy for you." School became incredibly easy. By the time I got to grade 9, I was a top student in the school. I went on to high school, discovered basketball. All of my coaches, not a single one shared my shade of beautiful, but they were dedicating so much of their time to us as young men. I saw that their singular act of kindness was making a massive difference in my life. And again, we grew up, even in Winnipeg, in what we consider to be a very poor socioeconomic neighborhood. My mother was working 7 days a week. So we had every opportunity to get into trouble. But we also realized we were in a land of opportunity and we were going to do something with it. And growing up, every time I'd watch television, the bad guys always looked like me. And I thought, that's not true. It doesn't have to be that way. And I'd never seen a Black officer in our city. So I can tell you that was the impetus for me joining the police service. I wanted to become one of the first to be that bridge builder between the police and individuals who share, I say, my shade of beautiful. I wanted to be a bridge builder. That's what led me into policing. It was not the trappings of a uniform or a badge or carrying a gun. It was how can we be agents of social change? And I saw the policing institution as this incredible impact that it can have on society if we're doing policing in that right way. That's what led me there.
Okay, that was a long story from cop on the beat too to being the police chief, and there are so many stories that accrue to each phase of that journey that we don't have the time to introduce our readers to all of them, not even really a small percentage of them. So I would encourage people to order your book. It's a good read, a tight read, and perhaps most importantly, it's an interactive read where your reflections are shared with the reader, who in turn can wrestle with the events, the ups, the downs, the challenges of their own lives. And that makes it not simply a pleasure to read, but an important read as well. I remember when you first became chief, a couple of remarkable things happened. The first is that you, just on the eve of assuming your responsibilities, publicly asked the people of Winnipeg, all of the people of Winnipeg, to pray for you. Now, Winnipeg, for those who are new to the city and who may be joining us online from any number of points afar, may not realize that Winnipeg is among the most diverse cities, not only in Canada, but in the world. We have diaspora communities from virtually everywhere, and of course, a very substantial community of Indigenous peoples and Métis peoples as well. That diversity can often be a significant challenge. It's diverse not only in beautiful shades of your color and mine, but it's diverse as well in variations on a theme, in terms of cultures and in terms of faiths. It's hard to imagine a week going by without, in this city, some sort of celebration of some culture that doesn't belong to me, or even for that matter, to you, Chief. There was a real furor. You asked the city to pray for you, and there is actually no constitutional regulation in Canada that separates church and state. So, for those of you beneath the national boundaries between Canada and the United States, we don't have a separation of church and state. We just tend to be discreet about our religion. But there were people saying, "Oh, you're breaching this line between church and state," and that was a first and challenging thing. But by the same token, you made it absolutely clear that you were police chief for everybody in the city. And you were police chief, never forgetting your Winnipeg roots, let alone your Jamaica roots. And one of the early things that we did together, along with any number of citizens in the North End, a rougher area of Winnipeg, I think you could fairly say, but still an area jammed with fine people, is you actually got out on a Saturday, as I recall, early on, with a whole whack of us from the entire community within the perimeter, the square road that surrounds Winnipeg in the middle of the prairies, where Winnipeg, as you're driving towards it, as my youngest son said, looks like Oz arising from the planet. And you picked up stuff. When I say stuff, that's the best way I can describe it. So those two things, you know, establishing yourself as a man of faith and by extension hope, and at the same time really a man of the city who is prepared to be in and of the city, not only of its people, but of its buildings, its neighborhoods, its sidewalks, and its alleys. Can you tell us a bit more about that and what pressed you to do that and to adopt an attitude towards policing that is now being seen as significant across North America and beyond.
Thank you for that. And that was significant for me. It was intentional. It was intentional for this. I wanted people to bring the very best of who they are to the workplace. And for me, I knew that my faith was such a significant piece of who I am. I'm not telling anyone else they have to believe or act exactly the way that Devon does. But if I was going to be the very best of who I am to the citizens that I serve, I have to be able to bring that piece of me to work because my faith drives everything that I do. And if you say to me, leave that at the door, it's going to impact the way that I deal with other leaders within the organization, ways that I deal with the community. And the important thing to realize is that I became a police chaplain in 1998 when I was a constable, no rank. So people knew very forthrightly, this is who Devon Clunis is. And as I moved up the ranks, I was consistently asked, are you still going to be a chaplain? Well, a chaplain is just a representation of who Devon Clunis is. Why would I give that up at any rank? So when I was appointed chief of police, and we were at the point murder capital and crime capital of the country, and I was speaking to a faith-based organization, people also have to appreciate that. I wasn't saying this to the broad public. I was speaking to a faith-based organization, and they asked, what can we do? I said, well, I know that you believe in the power of prayer, so I'm asking you to pray for the peace of our city. And I also said this, once you've prayed, put some action behind that. But sad, because people wanted to sensationalize it, they didn't say a thing about the chief saying, put action behind your prayer. They just said, the chief said, pray. So that's what became of that. And I was determined. Was I challenged? Yes. The response was not what I was expecting, but I thought, no, I'm going to live it out. I'm going to live out what I believe, and they will see the difference in the city. And certainly, I spent a lot of my own time with faith-based organization, encouraging them now to take up the call, and they did. And I can tell you this, the very first year, we saw the biggest drop in crime in our city, 13.9%, with no additional expenditures in policing, a growth in community cohesion. And you spoke about the project we did on Selkirk Avenue. Selkirk Avenue was a street that my mother lived on when we first arrived in the country. So that was my first experience in Canada. As chief of police, I went back to Selkirk Avenue and I saw a discarded toilet on the front streets. And I said, how can we expect people to feel good about themselves, good about their community, when this is what they're waking up and seeing every day? So if we want to deal with crime, let's deal with the social conditions that people are living in on a daily basis. And I can tell you, I put the call out to our citizens. And in the course of 2 weekends, over 300 people from outside that area came to it to help rejuvenate and restore it. And we call it Restore Our Core. Not only restoring the core of that used to be the central part of our city, but I'm talking about our own hearts. When we recognize we can't just look at others and say, well, that's their existence, let them stay in it. Restoring our own core means that we are actually caring for one another. It's that compassionate approach. So that's why I was so determined.
You know, that extension of the concept of compassion, pray for the city, but do something about it as well. Reminds me actually of St. Augustine, for those who might be theologically inclined amongst our viewers, who observed that it was important that we pray as though everything depended on God, and yet work as though everything depends on us. And in many ways, you've embodied that, but not only in your engagement with the citizens of Winnipeg, but with the force itself. I mean, there are lots of models of police forces: serve and protect, for example. But yours seems in part to have been to empower the police force of this city with a whole new vision of what policing could actually be. And I wonder if I can press you to expand on that just a wee bit.
Absolutely. So as I said, during my career, Winnipeg was consistently murder and crime capital. And what elected leaders would consistently do is give us more money for policing. I was getting so frustrated, I was almost ready to retire because I thought, no, we need to be agents of social change. And if you look at my LinkedIn title, that's how I describe myself, an agent of social change. And I wanted the police service not just to be a law enforcement entity. I wanted every single one of our members, almost 2,000 to see themselves as agents of social change. So here's what I did. I became chief of police. I didn't just give a directive. I gave every single member an opportunity to see me face to face, and I asked them these two questions. Why did you join the police service? Everyone, almost to a person, would say, we want to help people. The fact that we were murder and crime capital, I then followed up with, are you feeling fulfilled? Do you feel we're doing our best? Do you know that not one single member could say, I think we're doing our best? So then I put this vision in front of them. Rather than simply be involved with law enforcement, what if we create an environment to actually, and if we did this perfectly, we'd work ourselves out of our job. What if we created a better, healthier environment? And believe it or not, the members took up the call and started coming forward with ideas that before wasn't even in their mind's eye because they were no longer just enforcing the law. How about we create a right environment within our communities that will actually require less law enforcement? We start building a cohesive community. You know, when I retired in 2016, this is what was said in Maclean's magazine. They said it looked like a minor miracle had occurred in our city because they saw a significant reduction in crime. But the most important piece for me was this incredible growth in community cohesion. A healthy community is what we should be about. And the ultimate in terms of prevention is a police service that's looking at how do we help create an environment that's actually conducive to the reduction of crime, that we don't have to do greater enforcement, that the community is healthy, right? You want a healthy body. And that's what we're building. And the members adopted that. We call it crime prevention through social development. And I look back on my life that if I didn't have Miss Anna, who stepped in grade 6, who knows where I would be? So imagine if every child had an opportunity for a decent education, families are supported properly. That's where we should be investing a lot of our time. That's a much more compassionate approach to community building, as opposed to we need stiffer laws, more police, greater penalties, all of these things. They don't work.
Hope building rather than headbanging.
Absolutely, positively. You know, and I do believe that when people are led well, you know, at any level, they will actually grab a hold of that. I've had no resistance to this type of methodology, no matter where I've worked, no matter which level I've been at in terms of leadership. When I took over the role of the Inspector General for the province of Ontario, our largest province, I was brought in to help establish the Inspectorate of Policing. But again, it was predicated on law. Let's ensure that people are adhering to the law in terms of the police. And I said, we need to get away from that. We need to say, we want to help you achieve excellence. And if we find that you're falling short, how do we help you rise? Because I do believe that most people want to do their very best. They want to be excellent. But you can't always be a stick that gets you there. It has to be what's serving your purpose. What is making you feel fulfilled? I don't think anyone takes a leadership position intending to fail, but a lot of people fail because we're not creating a healthy environment for them to lead, nor for those who they're leading to be successful.
You know, one of the things that I profoundly enjoy about growing older, and I won't say there's a long list, but there are many things that I profoundly enjoy, is that I'm sitting here in the middle of the continent, the middle of the country, and I know Canada with the exception of the far north and the countryside of Newfoundland, perhaps as well as almost anyone else who is a Canadian citizen. I've kicked around the world, with the exception of Antarctica, for the last 30 years, given the various responsibilities that I've had. And I'm able to say, I think with confidence, that Canada is a good country. More importantly, it's a much better country than it was when I was growing up. And when I look back to the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, it's hard for me to imagine a conversation like this even having taken place. We've got a long way to go. There are many ways, Devon, and I think we've talked about this, in which Canada is a kind of, well, it's a work in progress, but perhaps more simply than a work in progress, it's a laboratory in which we're trying to first figure out what progress actually means. But we're grounded as a nation in something very particular and very important, and I mean no disrespect here, regardless of the tumultuous times in which we are living in North America, amongst Canada, Mexico, and the United States of America. We simply have a different basis on which we build our society. Famously, the United States of America is based on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. all of the noble ambitions. In Canada, we base our country on something different. In English, it really doesn't sound terribly interesting. It's peace, order, and good government. That's the constitutional basis of Canada. But in the original French, it's just slightly different, as I'm sure you recall. It's paix, bien-être, et bon gouvernement. Or, in a more particular translation, peace, welfare or commonwealth, and good
Mm,
government. And it seems to me that the influx of new Canadians since the late 1960s under the leadership of Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau has helped make our country a little closer to being a country that's based truly on peace, well-being, and good government, partly by introducing so many people from around the planet who bring so many gifts. In terms of this morning, not least of which is you, as so many of us continue to acknowledge. But picking that up and picking up for a moment the idea of the Charter of Compassion, and particularly the expression of the Charter in cities of compassion, I want to ask you two questions, and that's actually the second one, but it could also be seen as part B of the first question. Many of our viewers and participants this morning are well aware of the great philosopher Joseph Campbell's concept of the hero myth in his book, The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And anybody who has seen episode 5 of Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, will understand exactly what that means while Luke is undergoing training to become the Jedi that he was meant to be all along. But in some respects, the base of the hero myth is that an individual, having succeeded in large measure in achieving his or her life goals, often including some form of enlightenment about the nature of their community, of their city, instead of retiring to live a quiet life in well-earned leisure and peaceful reflection, instead take what they have learned, take the gifts that not only have they been given, but that they have accrued, and they go back into the fray. And that's the hero in every culture, in every age. Now, you know, Devon, you had it pretty sweet when retirement came. And yet, I recall a conversation we had a couple of years ago when you explained to me why you came back. And
mhm.
in coming back, and here's part B, in coming back, immediately grasped the potential and the significance of the charter, and particularly the concept of the cities of compassion. Not to put you on the spot, of course, but
Nope.
how did
No, I appreciate all that you just said. And the two words, peace and well-being. Think about why I went into policing in 1987. It really was about trying to bring a sense of peace and well-being. And yes, I retired and I could have just relaxed. But as I looked out at the world, to be honest with you, I became very disturbed inside that we're losing the sense of peace and well-being. Our country is becoming more diverse every single day. But what we see in terms of that diversity is a growing disunity. People are afraid to speak. We're afraid to have conversations. We're afraid to ask honest questions as we try to learn about one another. And the only thing that's growing is the fear. And so what's drawn me back into this is that we have to open up the conversations in a very healthy way, recognizing that we're rapidly changing. And if we want to create a future that is built on peace and well-being, we need to first recognize that at the core, we truly are one. And that's why the title of the book is One. Yes, we
Mhm.
share different shades of beautiful culture and all of those pieces. But at the core, we are one. And we all have a common desire for peace, well-being, unity, but no one is actually leading that conversations. And so just like when I brought up the issue of faith, when I became chief of police and put it out there, I stand on the stage and I talk about these very difficult issues, but in a way that's collaborative, a very compassionate approach. And at the end of those discussions, people come up to me and tell me repeatedly, we feel the same way, but no one is talking about it. And
Mhm.
so that's what's drawn me back into the arena, if you will, is I recognize that, God has put me in this place at this time with my experiences that I have a responsibility to share it in terms of trying to bring about that peace and well-being, because we see that this unity is growing, like right across the globe. The
Yeah.
one thing I appreciate about our city, and I always tell people, I am not saying that Canada is perfect, not saying that Winnipeg is perfect. Every city, every country has its challenges. But when I come home, I see people from every different tribe, nation. But here's the interesting thing. They're all operating together as one.
Hmm.
When I travel to other countries, sometimes you'll see people from different ethnic cultures, different shades of beautiful, but everyone is in their own little group. We're
Yeah.
not mixing to the same degree as what I see in our city. And so my hope is this: City of Winnipeg, country of Canada, can become that example to the rest of the world in terms of how we do community well by adopting the principles in the Charter of Compassion in terms of how we see one another, how we interact, how we operate. It's going to require some real meaningful work. It can't be a
Hmm.
directive from government. It has to be us as the people seeing the need and having healthy, meaningful, compassionate conversations with one another to build the future that we all desire.
This isn't, Devon, as we've talked about in the past, this isn't simply a question of a kind of a warm and fuzzy or vague humanism by any means. It is critical to the
Mhm,
central issues of the day, of war and peace, of poverty and equity, and frankly, of life and death. And
mhm.
I listen to you speak and can't help but think that one of our great challenges is that we just have not yet learned, but I think there are signs that we're in the process of learning the absolute wonderful nature of difference and diversity. It's about 50
Absolutely.
years ago that there was, I think the fellow's name was Michael Novak. Certainly was Novak. He was a poet of sorts, a minor poet, but still a poet. And in one of his verses, he notes that in this conversation, the only new thing is you. And it's getting to know your neighbor. I mean, this is
Yeah.
in every religious tradition, the so-called golden rule, uh, you know, is just first and foremost in all the ethical decisions that we make. And that's something that we talk about really with reference to the diversity in Winnipeg, getting to know our neighbor and consider
Mhm,
the city of compassion, Winnipeg, working towards a Winnipeg as a city of compassion. We have the support of the mayor, and I was there in his worship's office when he said, Devon, take the lead on this, which I think was really good news. And what does taking the lead mean to you?
It's exactly what we've been doing.
Mm.
From the minute I applied to the police service to become a constable, it was taking the lead. The
Yeah.
minute I applied to become the chief of police, put myself out there, it's taking the lead. The minute I decided to write one, put it out there, that's taking the lead. It's just starting the conversations. But as I said, creating real healthy environments for us to have that type of dialogue. A lot of what we see today are people shouting at one another from across the divide. There's no
Yeah.
bridge building taken there. So for me, Devon Clunis needs to be a bridge. And in all the work
Mm.
that I do in terms of consulting across the US and our country in terms of policing and community, it's me bringing police and community together. I typically see myself as the bridge. So taking the lead simply means being the bridge, being the one to be out there to bring two sides together.
Well, thanks for that. Just a pause. I'm trying to multitask here and occasionally check the chat to see if I'm missing anything important that I need to interject into the conversation. Someone quoted a book by Michael Novak, Different Novak. The one I'm speaking about is a Canadian poet and humanist. The other Mr. Novak is a somewhat conservative economist and philosopher, but nice fellow, no doubt. Definitely a different one, however, from a different part of the continent. So we don't have too much time left to go on. A couple of things that I wanted to add, though. We're going through a phase of what can only be just called global disruption. I won't address anything that might or may not be attributed to as a cause for that. We simply are. And there are many ways forward. One of the things that intrigued me about the Charter for Compassion when we met, I guess in September at the Cathédrale de Saint-Boniface here in Winnipeg, under the welcome of the Archbishop, was the comment made or the information offered about an idea of highways of compassion linking cities. And of course, today, when we talk about highways, we can speak, of course, of concrete or tarmac or asphalt linking cities, which is currently the initiative. And the first thing that comes to mind when I think of that is that Winnipeg, with its fairly recently articulated concept of centerport and Winnipeg as a centerport, really is at the hub of a link of rail and road that leads from Churchill on Hudson Bay to the Gulf of Mexico, not far from where you're currently sunning yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It runs almost as a kind of heartline throughout the continent. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, about how that might develop, the whole concept of not only one city, but we live in an urbanized world. All people are important no matter where they live, but the great majority of humanity lives in cities, some of them so vast as to encapsulate populations of whole countries. So how do you see that as developing? Do you have, in going back to the subtitle of your book, do you have hope that we're going to overcome the current tensions, disunity, heartache, and move towards something that allows us to link citizens in cities, small town communities, rural enclaves together to form a global network that might actually move us along another step even in human evolution?
I really do have that hope. And again, if you look at it geographically, as you noted, Winnipeg is at the heart of North American continent. Think about our own hearts, right? Pumps blood, funnels out to every part of our body. That's how I see our city. And I do plan to go on a Western tour when I get back to Winnipeg, probably end of April, May, sharing the story of one.
Yeah.
And we're going to go east, we're going south, we're going north. We're on this platform today that hopefully can reach individuals even broader than that. Do I believe that this can happen? Absolutely. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the hope that we can be so much more. I think what we need to do is this. First, get people to realize that, yes, we all have this common human need. This is who we are. Right now, I think there's a lack of vision for what the future would look like. We feel that we're going to be incredibly divided. But when you give people a vision that, no, the future, this is who we could be. As I said, I've found consistently when you put the right vision and leadership in front of people, they're ready and willing to follow. I think the current situation is such that people are looking for leadership, and if you don't provide it, they will adhere to anyone or anything that comes forward. So our responsibility is to give people this positive hope, to take us out of this very negative, very dark state. And as I said, it can't be just a directive from on high. It has to be us. We often forget that where the real power lies is in the people. So for me, it's about shifting the mindset within the populace. Because let's be honest, oftentimes, great change is not going to come from the political arena. The political arena will get on board when they see that this is where the mass of the people is moving.
Yeah.
So we have to empower the populace with a vision and a hope for something that's much better than what we're currently seeing.
Well, amen, brother. We're coming close to the limit of our time, and I wondered if I could really turn the podium, at least the metaphorical podium, over to you, Devon. What would you like to leave people with? I don't know whether you would consider your elevator speech or simply if you had one thing you want people to take away from this, and
Absolutely.
not simply to pray about, but to work about. What would it be? So over to you for the last words before we turn back to Felipe.
I would tie it up like this. As again, we spoke about the disunity that we're seeing right now, right across the globe. But I want to remind people that we need to be working towards the unity in humanity. We truly need to remember that. We have so much more that's common that binds us together. I do not want us ever to lose sight of that. And right now, what we typically feed on is the negative, and what we feed typically will grow. I spoke about Miss Hannah and the impact she's had on my life. And I know that every single individual I've been able to touch positively was because of her act of kindness all those years ago to that little boy in grade 6. This is the key thing I'd want people to remember. Doesn't matter what your position or station in life, you have the power to impact and influence a life for the better.
Yeah.
And you never know what the ripple effects of your singular act of kindness will be. I would not be speaking with you today, would not have been Chief of Police, Inspector General of Police, and International Police and Consultant if Miss Hannah, a grade 6 teacher, didn't use her influence. And
Mhm.
her act of kindness set me on that path. And so my job every single day is trying to pay that back and say, I'm going to do likewise for others. Oh, if we all just did that one thing, we'd create a radically different future for every single individual on this planet. One act of kindness, doesn't matter where you are, who you are, how much money, we can each do one act of kindness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've, gosh, sorry you broke up a little bit there, Devon. It could be my connection. I was just going to observe, though, that we, as you say, aren't always aware of what one act of kindness can do. And yet, in the Talmud of the Jewish people, it's noted that to save a life, perhaps even by a kind word, a supportive gesture, a cup of coffee, a smile, that to save one life is the same as if you saved an entire world. And it seems to me that that's nothing less than what you're currently embarking upon, is an attempt to save us from ourselves and for ourselves. Felipe, I'm going to turn things back over to you to wrap up according to the manner necessary. I think Devon has slipped off to try and reconnect himself.
I think so, but how timely that he finished that whole speech and you were able to finish with the little compliment. Thank you so much. If Devon joins us again, that would be great. But if not, I want to thank you and Devon for this incredible conversation. So inspiring. I think that we were able to hear more than just hope, but also inspiration and support, and how crucial it is to have those supporters in our lives, like that teacher for Devon.
Mhm.
So very, very wonderful. And I thank you for your facilitation and the incredible knowledge that you have on all these things. Hey, Devon's here. We were
I was
just
just going to say thanks on
here.
his behalf, and now I won't.
But Devon, thank you so much again for joining us, rejoining us. What a wonderful inspiration conversation. I was just telling everyone that, not only were we able to hear about your story of hope, but the power that those little angels that are, placed in our life stories, how they can provide the inspiration necessary for us to create change, to be the agent of, not chaos, but of change, of igniting something new and something different and inspiring. So thank you both for that. Now, I wanted to share my screen really quickly to let people know about the different events that are happening with the Charter. So every Wednesday, we have our Harmony of Humanity webinar series with our Executive Director, Marilyn Turkovich. Happens every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific. We will have the next session next Wednesday on April 1st. On April 5th, next Saturday, we have Golden Rule Day, and this year's theme is Humanity's Timeless Compass. You can have more information on our event page. We are looking for submissions from people and organizations all around the world that would like to join us on this compilation program that we'll be posting and sharing with everyone on Saturday, April 5th for Golden Rule Day. We also have a webinar series, Building Compassionate Communities. If you or anyone that knows is curious about starting a compassionate community, a compassionate city, which was very much mentioned on this webinar, we have 4 different sessions. All of them are the same webinar. The same information will be passed on, but it's on different days and times so that people from around the world and different time zones can check it out. You can look at that on our event calendar. We have 2 global reads on April. One of them is the author and Kids Routes founder, Mark Duellert. He's joined by the facilitator, Joy Goma, and this is going to be on Wednesday, April 9th at 9 a.m. And the second global read is it's the author and on-being broadcaster, Krista Tippett, is joined by facilitator Parker J. Palmer on Wednesday, April 23rd at 9 a.m. Pacific time with her book, Becoming Wise, an inquiry into the mystery and art of living. Very, very exciting webinar as well. We also have other chats and events in our healthcare sector with a kitchen table chat on April 4th. webinar series on the compassionate building communities that I was telling you about. And last but not least, Allies in Action, the Canada chat. We have these conversations based on geographical areas. This is specifically for people in Canada that are part of organizations, have signed the charter, or belong to a compassionate community like Compassionate York region where you are at. So finally, the Charter Sangha, every last Saturday of the month, we have a moment of sharing, of meditating, of silence, where we create community every last Saturday of the month. So this one falls on this Saturday, March 29th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And you can have all that information with in our event page on our website, charterforcompassion.org. Again, thank you so much, both Devon and James, for being part of this global read, and everybody else that attended. We really appreciate everything that is happening with this conversation and the repercussions that we'll have in the future. And we'll be seeing you soon in some other time.
Excellent. Devon,
Thank you. Thank you, James.
Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Yes,
Bye all.
Bye, Lynn.